So, any other graphics card buyers out there dealing with some severe whiplash right about now? Yeah, if you've been following the GPU market even somewhat closely over the last couple of years, I wouldn't blame you. We went from not being able to find any cards in stock, at least not any that weren't scalped into oblivion, to right now where we're so spoiled for choice, at least when it comes to the older cards, it feels like you almost have to pay someone to take your GTX 1080 off your hands. But as bad as the GPU market has become for companies and people selling cards, especially terrible cards like a certain 4060, this flip-flop of availability and pricing is an absolute godsend for anyone looking to buy a GPU in 2023. Even more so now that we have a brand new, legitimately exciting third option to consider. Intel's Arc cards have been shaking things up in a non-insignificant way for a while now, and for a good reason. And in this video, I'll be taking my first ever look at what the bluer grass on the other side has to offer in the form of the Intel Arc A750. One of the most exciting cards I've played around with in a very long time. Almost as exciting as a sponsor for this video. Me. That's right, no sponsors for this one, but if by the end of this video you want to grab an A750 of your own, or any of the other parts featured in this video, do it via my Amazon affiliate links down below. You get cool new gear and support the channel and the work I do here while you're at it. Win-win. Alright, so I don't usually get too deep into the specs for all of the parts I review on this channel, but considering just how important Intel's entry into the GPU battle royale is, I'm definitely making an exception here. Intel's Arc A-series desktop lineup currently includes the more entry-level A310 and A380 cards, the top-of-the-range A770 in both 8 and 16GB flavors, though if you want the 16GB limited edition, you'll have to act fast since Intel won't be making any more of that particular version. And then finally, right in the sweet spot, we have our A750 right here. The A750 is a pretty beefy GPU, packing 21.7 million transistors into a relatively huge die measuring in at 406 square millimeters. For reference, one of the A750's biggest rivals, the RTX 3060, only features 12 million transistors packed into a much smaller 276 square millimeter die. The A750 is also big on other more interesting numbers, including 3,584 shading units, 448 tensor cores to boost machine learning tasks, 28 dedicated RT cores, and base clock speed of 2050 MHz that boosts all the way up to 2400 MHz. The card also features a very capable memory configuration, sporting 8 gigs of GDDR6 with 256-bit bus and a bandwidth of 512 GB per second. Unfortunately, the card is also pretty big on power draw, requiring both an 8-pin and 6-pin power connector for a TDP of 225 watts. But the most interesting number of all is 240, as in $240, since that's the price you can expect to pay for an A750. At that price, the A750 comes in at around $20 cheaper than its direct competition from Team Green, the RTX 3060, and thanks to price cuts from AMD, puts it just around $15 cheaper than the RX 6600 XT. For that price, along with what should be dang decent mid-range gaming performance, the A750, along with the other Arc cards, also ships with some other legitimately useful features. The most important of which, to me at least, is support for XeSS super sampling, Intel's answer to NVIDIA's DLSS and AMD's FSR, and the Xe Media Engine, which leverages AI to accelerate content creation and includes support for the AV1 codec. Which, if you're a streamer or content creator, you know how much of a big deal that is. But let's not get too stuck in the weeds just yet, because first I want to give Intel some major props for the design of this thing. Intel's own limited edition version of the A750 is nothing short of a masterclass in GPU building, especially considering that it's a first-generation product. This thing looks and feels phenomenal. Even though the majority of the card's shroud is plastic, it really doesn't feel like it. The card has a reassuring weight to it, landing at just over a kilogram, and it feels absolutely solid. Even more so than many much more expensive cards from the likes of MSI, Asus, and the other AIB cards I've worked with over the years. And man, does this thing ever look sleek. The matte black on the face of the card, while also feeling soft to the touch, looks incredibly clean, though it is a bit of a fingerprint magnet, and the blackout fans sell the whole aesthetic even more. Add to that a sturdy black metal support bracket running through the middle of the card, finished off with minimalistic Intel Arc branding, a silver mirrored strip framing the face of the card and adding some contrast to the mix, and a clean backplate with a pinstripe design and even more stylish branding. And man, you've got yourself a heck of a premium looking card. So premium that I don't even mind that the Intel Arc branding on the side of the card is an RGB. As much as I love RGB, sticking to a clean white LED just feels kind of appropriate for this card, and I think it looks fantastic. Though not gonna lie, the RGB lighting of the A770 limited edition card does catch my eye just a teensy bit more. But hey, looks are subjective, so let's move on to something we can all agree on: performance. The system I used for testing all the cards was equipped with AMD's Ryzen 9 7900X, slotted into MSI's Pro X670P motherboard, 32 gigs of Gale's Evo 5 memory running at 6000 MHz with CL32 timings, Crucial P5 as our main drive, and all of it powered by Antec's signature 1000 watt power supply. And first up are two synthetic benchmarks in the form of Unigen Superposition and 3D Mark's Time Spy. In both cases, the A750 made absolute mincemeat of the 1660 Ti and the aging GTX 1080, while somehow managing to come not too far off of striking distance from the RTX 3070. Impressive stuff. Moving on to real games, focusing first on 1080p, Intel's A750 continues to dominate the two older cards. Of course, the 3070 still takes the W in all of the games tested, as well it should, given it's hundreds of dollars more expensive. But after removing it from the equation, the A750 comes out ahead of the other two cards in 9 out of the 13 games tested, and in many of those cases, by a friggin' landslide. In games like Far Cry 6, Spider-Man Miles Morales, Hitman 3, and the Resident Evil 4 remake, the A750 came out on top by more than 29%, and by as much as 38%. While in the other games where it won, it still won by decent margins. The A750 does lose out to the older cards in a couple of the games tested, but in most of those cases it wasn't really anything to write home about. I say most there because there are two notable exceptions. Firstly, no matter what I tried, I couldn't get Borderlands 3 to run on the A750 at all. And in Valorant, the Intel card severely underperformed compared to all three of the other cards. I'm not entirely sure why the card had trouble with these two titles specifically, but thankfully they do seem to be the exceptions. With all the numbers minus Valorant tallied up, the A750 managed to beat the 1660 Ti by 28% and pushed ahead of the GTX 1080 by a very respectable 16% at 1080p. Moving on to 1440p, the A750 somehow manages to impress even more. This time by taking the dub in 11 of the 13 games tested, and by even larger margins than at 1080p in some cases. Even more impressive is that the card managed to stick well above 60 FPS in all of the titles minus God of War, where it just barely missed the mark, which at these higher settings is no small feat. Averaging out our scores at 1440p, the A750 improves on its lead over the 1660 Ti, this time coming in at 40% faster, and leaves the GTX 1080 in the dust by around 24%. Clearly, Intel has built quite the monster of a 1080p card here, one that can also excel at 1440p as long as you don't completely max out your in-game quality settings. But that's not the end of the story. Intel equipped this thing with Tensor and RT cores, so let's take a quick look at what those are capable of. Now, the numbers for this round of testing aren't all that comprehensive because I wasn't able to turn ray tracing on for the 1660 Ti or GTX 1080 in like most of the games, but the results are still very interesting nonetheless. In 3D Mark's ray tracing focused Port Royal benchmark, the A750 flexes those RT core muscles, landing a score just 21% lower than the much beefier RTX 3070, and completely crushing the poor GTX 1080. Then, in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, Far Cry 6, Spider-Man Miles Morales, F122, and the Resident Evil 4 remake, it ran more than comfortably at 60 FPS and above. It obviously couldn't keep up with the RTX 3070's RT horsepower in most of those cases, but the fact that the games were this playable with RT settings this high on first-gen hardware is still kind of crazy. The only hiccup the A750 faced came in the form of Cyberpunk, where the game was barely playable at 28 FPS. But that's why we have super sampling tech, where those tensor cores came in very handy. With Intel's XeSS turned on, the game ran at a much more playable 52 FPS, which was an even bigger jump than we saw with the 3070 and turning DLSS on. This really is one heck of a showing for Intel's first foray into the dedicated GPU market. And the A750 limited edition, it's kind of a beast too. The card had no problem boosting to its max clock speed of 2400 MHz and sticking there comfortably, while also staying well below its max TDP at 191 watts, which meant the GPU only maxed out around 68 degrees C. In order to keep temps low, the card's fans did ramp up to 2500 RPM, which did make it a bit loud under heavy load, but not noticeably more so than any of the other cards I tested. Now, if it seems like I'm a fan of Intel's A750, it's because I am. I wasn't really sold on Arc when it first launched. I mean, I was very happy to have more competition entering the market, just like every other reviewer, but that was mostly because said competition might force NVIDIA and AMD to lower their prices. And on top of that, Ark's launch was pretty rough when it came to drivers and lackluster performance in older games. But now, many months later, Intel has proven that they're committed to these cards, and have delivered on most of their promises to increase performance and stability in a lot of the games where the cards struggled. And other than my version of Borderlands 3, which refused to work, and some less than stellar Valorant performance, I didn't run into any bugs or weird issues during my time with the card. Everything was seamless, just like any other card from either of the two big boys. Heck, I didn't even have any issues with Intel's graphics command center software, other than maybe extremely annoying pop-up notifications. But then again, I only used it to install drivers and set fan speed, so I didn't really dig all that deep into it. Overall, I think what Intel has done here with the A750 is extremely impressive. And thankfully not just in an impressive for a first-gen GPU or impressive enough to make NVIDIA and AMD lower prices kind of way. The card presents a very decent value for the performance you're getting, whether you're gaming at 1080p, 1440p, or even if you want to play around with some ray tracing settings. And on top of all that, I think Intel has improved the drivers enough for me to actually feel comfortable recommending it to anyone, rather than just enthusiasts who like to tinker with stuff and know how to fix things when they pop up. That's right, AMD and NVIDIA, Intel is here, and man do I hope they're here to stay. Unlike me, who can't stay because this video is done. Thanks to everyone for watching, and while you're down there getting subscribed and hitting the like button, be sure to use my Amazon affiliate links to buy all the parts mentioned in this video to support the channel. Well, you don't have to buy all of them, but any of them would be nice. And yeah, I'll catch you all in the next one. Cheers.